Hello, everyone. Welcome and good whatever moment of this beautiful day you are enjoying on your time zones. It's such a joy to have you with us for another conversation part of our August series. And today, this space is for discussing employee health and how we can integrate employee health into organizational strategy. My name is Minola Jacques. I am your co host for the next hour. We have Jessa working her magic backstage and keeping us all safe from tech and logistics. And I would just like to start with asking people in the audience for a little bit of help. If you can just drop a few comments in the chat, maybe just say hello and let us know where you're connecting from. That would really, really help us. First, knowing that everything is up and running and we are streaming live. And second, you will also help us travel vicariously around the world. We have an amazing lineup of speakers just ready to come on stage. So Jessa, if you can just beam them up. And while they settle into their Zoom boxes, I will encourage everybody in the audience to use the comments generously. So whatever it is that we are tackling on stage, please drop your own thoughts, your own experiences, your own stories and ideas, because first and foremost, that helps the community grow. We learn from each other, and that is a wonderful, wonderful way to support us and just make our worlds wonderfully rich. I do see we have people coming in. Wonderful. So at least we got the tech right for today. I think we're halfway there. Now let's try and make the most out of our 1 hour together. And let's look into the well-being imperative. Now, what I will do, we will start off as you are already used to. I will just pass the e-mic around as you appear on my screen clockwise. And I will ask you to first shortly introduce yourselves. And also, for the purpose of our conversation today, what is the understanding? What is the outline of well-being that you bring into our space? Because well-being sounds so self-explanatory, yet I am sure that we all have a slightly different lens and take to it. So, Melissa, it's so good to see you on my screen. Welcome. Just a few words about you and how do you think about well-being?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Great to be here. I basically have my background in HR and serving as a chief people officer, but I also uniquely am a licensed clinical social worker. So I very well integrate employee wellness for those aspects. But when I think about it's the whole picture holistically: physical, social, mental, well-being, and all of those things that contribute.
Thank you so very much. Agostina, good to see you. Welcome.
Thank you, Minola. Glad to be here once again. My name is Agostina Berni. I'm based in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and I have more than 20 years experience in HR progressive leadership roles, initially for LATAM and most recently globally for technology organizations such as Google, Red Hat, and most recently Eventbrite. My last role there was as a senior HRBP for the product organization. And for me, well-being is a critical element for organizations to thrive today. And as Melissa said, this includes not only physical well-being, but also emotional, mental, and even financial well-being, which is by research tells us the highest stressor for people these days. So glad to be here today, exchanging thoughts on this very relevant topic.
Thank you. Sheila, so good to have you in this conversation with us.
Good morning. I'm in Phoenix, so it's morning here, very early. Very happy to be here. My name is Sheila Kruger. I, as it says there, formerly worked at Zoom as the global benefits leader. I do have also 20 plus years in HR with progressive positions in total rewards, ending up in that benefit space. Pretty much during that whole time, there was always a component of wellness. And so my view of wellness has definitely evolved over the years, where it was, let's do something so people can participate in something and maybe get a reward. And that was really it. And come around to the fact where wellness to me is very holistic, as both Melissa and Agostina mentioned, all the aspects of wellness that are there. And also that it's not just HR's responsibility to help with that. We definitely need to build checks and balances in our organizational structures that are going to help our employees maintain their health, maintain their well-being. So that's kind of the position I'm coming from.
Thank you. Welcome into our conversation, Linda. Good to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat with you all today. So, my background, I come from just really the traditional HR background, into which well-being is not really kind of a narrative or thought of, right? So, I set out my career to make sure that the people experience is seamless, and in a way, it connects back to well-being, right? So, I coach executives and leaders on, hey, how to make this people experience. As everyone has said, more holistic, but just more seamless in general. And that requires keeping your employees in mind. So I'm happy to chat with you all today.
Thank you. And who else could make this panel complete than Stephanie? Good to see you.
So great to see you, Minola. Good morning, everyone. I am also calling in from Phoenix. I think Sheila has got more coffee in than I have, though. She's wide awake. I'm getting there. It is so lovely to be part of this conversation and chat with all of you. I am Stephanie Lemek. I am a former HR executive and now the founder and CEO of an organization called The Wounded Workforce. And we're all about building trauma-informed workplaces. So, of course, this topic is near and dear to my heart and my passion. And for me, when I think about well-being, Melissa kicked us off with such a beautiful definition. It's really our holistic health. We have this tendency to bifurcate to mental health, physical health, social health. But to me, that holistic health is what we mean when we talk about well-being, and it's pretty broad. So super excited to be part of this conversation.
It's absolutely wonderful having all of you on the screen and in the audience with us. And I was thinking, before we go into the details and into the technicalities of this, I'm curious, as you look to the conversations you're having within your organizations or with the organizations that you're serving, how do you feel the conversations around employee health and well-being are changing? What are some of the big trends that you pick up within these conversations? And also, equally, do you see some undercurrents that are more subtle and you just want to call out and bring into our space today? And for some reason, I go diagonally always with the first question. Sheila, you will be the pioneer for this one. And then everybody just jump in and build your own free flow conversation. So Sheila, kick us off.
Okay. Great question, by the way. I think, like I mentioned, such an evolution of what well-being has meant over the past 20, even 30 years. It's not just get an EAP check, you're done. That's it, right? So I think what I'm seeing is, and what I'm hearing is the question of, is this still important? And which is, always kind of shocks me when somebody asks me that, because it's like, how could it not be important? This is to me, such a core foundation of how we deal with our employees. And I think the other thing is talking about what we're talking about today, organizational strategy, and how do we think about well-being, not just in HR, but throughout the entire company, right? So one of the things I end up talking about a lot is, how often have you patted yourself on the back for providing a really great, let's say, mental health solution for your employees, and you see great participation, you see utilization, you see people getting better, and it's wonderful. And then you step back and you realize, why are all these people going for mental health counseling? What's driving that? And how often is that the employer? Are you understaffed? Do you have managers that have not received proper training and they are making somebody's life miserable, or a whole group of people miserable? How much do we have a duty to make sure that we're setting up our organizations to avoid causing the problems that we then take great credit for fixing, right? So yes, it's wonderful that we can produce those things for our folks, but it's even better if they don't need them, right? Like let's make it very clear that a lot of times it is us, the employer, that is driving people into situations where they require different kinds of well-being. And that could be financial too. Are we paying people properly? All of those things. It's not just mental health. It's like, what do our chairs look like? Are we driving everybody into MSK issues? All of those things that we can control as employers, and that we need to think about as we're looking at well-being and our employees.
How dare you have such a mic drop, Sheila, for the first question. I knew she had more coffee than me. I love what you're saying, Sheila, because it gets to exactly the first thing I thought, is that so much of what we've been doing, especially as HR professionals, when it comes to well-being, when it comes to employee health, has been programmatic. How do we integrate a benefits program? How do we respond to employees' needs with our benefits? Which is fantastic. And it's not something we should stop doing, but exactly what you said, looking at how the day-to-day experience of our life in the workplace impacts our overall well-being is really significant. And I often get a question, Stephanie, what is the best way to, address mental health at work? If you only had time to do one thing. And I said, you're going to hate my answer, because it's the hard work of changing culture. And it's the hard work of understanding those impacts on employee well-being and how they can then prevent those bad things from happening. But also in the work I do around trauma-informed workplaces, sometimes a wonderful workplace, a positive workplace, a psychologically safe workplace can also be a value add to well-being, a source of healing, a source of empowerment. So when I think about this topic, when we talk about organizational strategy, this really is kind of the shift in mindset that Sheila mentioned that I'm so excited about.
Yeah, I second what Sheila and Stephanie have said. I think people have to get under the hood, right? See what the symptomatology is, and then really figure out how you're going to make it change. But when I'm consulting with organizations, what I find is people are realizing about that employees are bringing their whole self to work more and more. I think really since the pandemic, that's usually a benchmark that people look towards when everything started to change. So I think it's really important that the culture is part of this, right? And to Stephanie's point, you can have the best programs, but if you're not living it through from the top to the bottom, bottom to the top, and in the middle. So I think it's really important that people are looking at more training for the managers and understanding what to look for at their employees during the day at work to see if there are some things that are causing it. Like we said, managers that may not be properly managing a team. What if there are coworkers that have issues? Or if you've seen a really high potential employee and you've seen like a change in their behavior or things like that. I think it's really important to take note of that and train it. But not only managers, we want to train employees to notice things in their coworkers and people to have tools. And I think what we want to do is create a lot of balance, right? We want this we have this strategic organizational missions and objectives, and people want to work hard to achieve them. But we have to know that people have things outside that sometimes have to be balanced. And we know that life happens, and sometimes people have to alter schedules or do different things. So I think it's all about having this approach where we're incorporating it and living it. not just having these great things that we can say when we're doing our recruiting. We have these great wellness programs that you can take advantage. You want to feel that people come in and they're feeling it every day as they're experiencing their work and their coworkers and managers.
I couldn't agree more with what has been said thus far. I just want to add an additional thought that comes to mind, and it is understanding also the global economic landscape we are in, right? We are navigating recession and crisis in many countries, and organizations, especially myself coming from the tech industry, have been heavily impacted. So when it comes to organizations navigating restructures or even big transformations, there are many organizations undergoing, with the presence of AI, undergoing major transformations. So as HR and business leaders, we must also take into consideration and that these things are also aggressively impacting our workforce. And so we need to continuously be listening, actively listening and pulsing how our workforce is doing. And I can retell that in my last organization, there was an increase and that we could see quarter over quarter around levels of stress or even burnout. And of course, I partnered with my business leaders to tackle this. But we need the partnership with the business. And first of all, identifying that these are factors that are affecting our workforce, then pulsing to understand where the trouble may be, and then, of course, tackling the issue effectively.
Okay, what more is there to say? Everyone touched on such great points here. In alignment with what everyone has said, right? The participation and collaboration with leadership for sure. And it seems that well-being, in particularly, mental health is often advertised for the employer branding, right? It's, hey, we offer ABC, come in, and then it stops there, and then it starts an employee experience in which it's, wait, I thought I could trust y'all. Wait, where's this and that, right? And so we have to hold kind of leaders and the company accountable for, if we're going to offer these benefits, we need a leadership person outside of me, outside of HR, to come in to say, hey, I also value this, and this is how we're going to integrate this into the policies, into the process, right? So challenging leaders to extend their commitment to well-being beyond just the recruitment, employee branding. The second piece I've noticed from the employee side is not all of the well-intended offerings from companies are suitable for everyone, right? So we often hear work-life balance. I've worked with really awesome people who they say, hey, I like to work at midnight, Linda, and I'm entirely okay with it. And it's like, okay, you have to be cognizant that everyone has their own needs, and it is really our role's responsibility to find out those needs and how people define well-being.
Mm-hmm. You all drop such amazing conversation, Candice. So there are at least 15 mental post-its open now in my head, but I would love to first collect on two of them. One is that this is in no way an HR thingy, and this is in no way an exclusively HR piece of work. And the other one is, how can we move from having this in a programmatic fashion, but rather embedded in the culture, even beyond the organizational strategy, but in the very culture of the organization? So I would invite you to take a few minutes and really look at who are the key stakeholders, and I would even say who are the key allies in making this conversation a culture conversation. And Melissa, I would ask you to lead us into this slice.
So when we think about who's involved here, right, we've definitely been reaffirming that HR is one of the stakeholders and players, but not the only one. We really want to put the focus, I think, on the leadership team, right? This has to come from them, and they need to model it from the top down. But it really has to be experienced by everybody. So all of the managers, all the employees need to be feeling what people are saying. So if we go to a town hall where we're going to be talking about a new program, or we're going to be releasing a new strategy or things like that, I think it's important to, have these other things included, to have a spotlight on people who might be doing things outside work that are related, people who are growing and doing things, and maybe have like a spotlight on what managers have done to incorporate people to be able to be driving all the strategy and all the organizational stuff, but that they've also been able to maintain some sort of balance outside. And that balance is different for everybody, right? Not everybody has a family. People might have a really big hobby. So I think it's important to show that we support these types of events, and we also support that you are able to be involved in things. When we have community, right? All the organizations like to say that they're, like to be part of community. So let's highlight employees that are doing that. So the stakeholders are really, I think, everybody in the organization playing their part. We need the leadership team to buy in. We need all the managers to show actively that they're supporting this when their employees ask for things, or ask for time off, or ask to leave early, or working on a project that needs to be flexible and cross-functional. And employees need to advocate for themselves and take ownership and make sure that what the company and their managers are saying, that they're actually living, and kind of help them to embody that by expressing what they need, so that people can be clear. And feedback has to always be taken. So it's not that you roll this out one time and you're done, right? This checkbox exercise. This is evolving. We have so many things going into the world. Agustina said about the global financial thing. People are like spouses and partners and other family members. People are maybe employed at the organization you're part of, but they're impacted by people who might be feeling the financial impact. People are having trouble, right? Maybe they have college-age children, right? They might not be able to have enough money because they can't get the aid from the government based on making a certain amount. So it's holistic is really my point, that everybody is a stakeholder. Everybody has to be invested in this for this to work across the organization, to become the culture.
And if I may add, Minola and team here, besides the business, the executive level, employees, and HR, I think one underutilized resource is our ERGs, right? Employee resource groups. And I recall specifically in the last organization I was at, we really partnered with the AAPI, so our Asian American and Pacific Islander Employee Resource Group, to tackle this. And they created a great proposal focused on rest. It was a several days workshop that had a tremendous impact, but not only for the specific group within the ERG, but it was an invitation for the overall organization. And we received, again, great reception about this. So I want to invite here other HR colleagues and leaders to really partner with our ERGs in the organization. They are eager to work on this impactful initiatives.
I love that. That's absolutely amazing. And, to that point of utilizing ERGs in the current groups, that's music to my idea. HR needs to be flexible. We don't have to be the main character all the time. We can definitely just be an ally. And I say that because I've worked with countless companies who, when I go in, I look around, I'm like, who is the culture person? If there's no one, okay, great, let's build it. It doesn't necessarily need to be me. Who has the people kind of, who has invested in people in the culture, right? That's where to start. I've advised companies in which obviously there's the COO or, a C-suite person who just they have this charisma about themselves and the team trusts them. That is a perfect ally to talk with them. And, I don't even want to say coincidentally, it's that person usually emulates the values of the company. And so I love having those conversations. Then my conversations with those folks are like, okay, you take this group, you be the charisma, the person that kind of leads it. I'll be they're supporting as HR. And so definitely, having the flexibility to be an ally to the company, letting other people thrive, definitely. But to all the points made here, is it is a total company wide effort, from the CEO to the culture allies, champions, C-suites, to then the managers, keeping the managers accountable and advising them to say, hey, this is what to look out for, and this is how you can support and where I come in as well.
I love what everyone has said so far. I'm gonna make Sheila go last so she doesn't mic drop ahead of me again. I'm gonna tease you this whole time, Sheila. So for me, what I think about this, we talk a lot about culture, and culture is this big, beautiful, nebulous thing. And it's so tricky because, we need leadership buy-in. We need leaders to model it. We need individuals to model it in their day-to-day. We have managers have these responsibilities. It's tricky. It's hard. So one thing that I really focus on is how can we build processes and systems within the organization through the lens of the culture we want that kind of scaffold the behaviors, that kind of keep us in those lanes, that support an experience every day consistently across the organization that builds that experience. And I talk a lot about that. We work a lot towards that with my organization to focus on how do processes and systems help us build those cultural outcomes, those experiences we want. And it wouldn't be me on a hacking HR panel if I didn't pick on managers a little bit. And I don't want to pick on them specifically. I want to talk about all of their many challenges they experience and the very tough jobs they have. But one thing we think about, so as HR professionals, we know the ropes when it comes to talking about health, talking about employee health, navigating what can be a tricky tightrope sometimes about caring about someone, expressing empathy, asking how they are, and not asking illegal questions, especially, for US based folks who are considering, what can I ask? What can I ask? And the truth is, if you ask a lot of managers, I had a very interesting conversation with a colleague of mine the other week. Sometimes managers don't realize that asking, hey, are you okay? Is anything going on? They don't know that they can do that because they're worried they might be asking about a health condition. So what work can we do to empower managers with the right understanding, the right language, so they can even just be the best version of themselves and go, hey, Stephanie, are you okay? How's it going? What's going on? Because that has an outsized impact on individual employee experience.
All right. Well, you guys didn't leave me much to talk about, but that's never stopped me from talking. I love the culture discussion because I think it's so important, and I cringe a little bit about culture because I've been places where from the top down, culture has been so important. But I've also been places where from top down, what the CEO wants to be the culture is not the culture, and they are not necessarily willing to listen to the fact that that's not happening. Just because you say it doesn't make it so. And so that partnership between HR, I know we've talked a little bit about how it shouldn't all be HR's, responsibility, but I think this is one key area where we have to work so hard with our senior leaders to make them understand or help them understand, what it is we're talking about. Why is the culture important? Why is it not what you say it is? It's what people experience that is the culture. And so I just think that's such an important aspect of what we do that impacts well-being so much. And to me, the whole return to office conversation has been a big part of that. It's impacted people so heavily, and it's something that if you're within 50 miles of the office, you need to be in. Well, if you live in Nebraska, 50 miles is, 20 minutes. That's not a big deal. If you live in the Bay Area, that could be a 2-hour commute. Like, it's just things that you have to consider all the way along, right? And all of those things are going to contribute to how your employees feel about their job, about the culture of their job, and their well-being. It's obviously going to impact their well-being. So I think that culture conversation is so important, and being a good partner to your C-suite, and hopefully being able to express to them why it is so important, and pointing out the flaws, if there are any, in the culture conversation, and it's just imperative for the HR team to be able to do.
Mm. Well, it's super frustrating to say that we're halfway through the conversation. I feel that we could go on easily for 3 hours, not just 1 hour. And I was thinking, I believe it was February when we had an entire monthly series dedicated to HR for HR. And I know we talked about this, but I feel called to bring in this topic into our conversation again today. How can we make sure that HR as a function can, to some extent, role model and be almost, like the pilot environment for best practices? Because I believe we don't talk about it enough. And many times I am shocked, for example, in employee experience conversations, how many of my colleagues in HR that's outside of HR, it doesn't apply to us. So I would like to save some minutes and look into the HR flavor of integrating employee health into organizational strategy. And Stephanie, I will ask you to lead us into this because in full disclosure, we share a passion, in my case, borderline obsession with compassion fatigue. So Stephanie, please.
Yeah. Oh, you got me started on compassion fatigue. Just immediately, that's all I want to talk about. So compassion fatigue is this idea, this concept that completely, consistently going to your well of empathy or compassion can eventually dry out, especially if you're not replenishing it. So compassion fatigue, we often think of it when it comes to, first responders, paramedics, emergency room doctors, those, helping professions that are often seeing, experiences of a traumatic event, experiences of really trying times in someone's life. Many of us have spent many years in HR. How many times have you experienced a trying time in someone else's life? And a very interesting path that you have to walk between policy, compliance, and what's right for that employee. So compassion fatigue is much more prevalent in non-first responder type positions than we think about. Even think about customer service. Someone's on the phone all the time with someone trying to solve a frustrating problem. And it can be a lot. It can drain your empathy. It can create a version of you that isn't the best, isn't your favorite. So when it comes to compassion fatigue, it's so important to understand what kind of empathetic requirements are part of a job, whether that's an HR professional, customer service leader, manager, and keep a pulse on that. And I'm a big believer in prevention. We talk a lot about burnout and how preventing burnout is so important because it takes a long time to recover. The same thing goes for compassion fatigue or an experience of trauma. The more we can do to prevent it with self-care, and I mean, the self-care where we're looking at our physical health, our emotional health, our social and spiritual well-being, not just, green juices and massages. self-care is really important. And that's where I do get excited, because a lot of the well-being programs we've moved to, we talk about moving away from programs, but a lot of the well-being programs that have been introduced recently do really focus on how we actively enable that real meaningful self-care for our teams. And if we're thoughtful about how we communicate that, we can really do a lot as it relates to preventing those experiences of compassion fatigue that can come up as part of our work. I know I just zeroed in on compassion fatigue, but you knew that would happen.
And this is resonating. Oh, sorry, Linda.
Go ahead.
Okay. By the way, Stephanie, this is resonating definitely with me, and it makes me think and reflect about the way I lead, right? My team, and two of the ways I think I have strived for to promote well-being is one, prioritization. We cannot be delivering everything to everyone, so being clear on those key deliverables or key priorities has been key for me to align with my team. And then setting boundaries is the second one, right? It is important to say, as you know, we always say yes, but it's important to learn how to say no without breaking our relationships and our political acumen within the organization. And this has been crucial for me as a leader, not only, as I said, showing this and mirroring this to my team of direct reports, but also being the mirror for the business. I recall several conversations with C-suite leaders and business leaders where I was very centered in saying, no, we cannot deliver this at this time, or this is outside the scope of we can do. And this takes courage. I know this takes courage, but we need to be courageous HR leaders. And this is part of what creating and promoting well-being means for me.
That is awesome. No, just speaking on that balance, right? I find that it's always a balancing act. My personality, I put a line into my work. It's to a fault, to be completely honest. But when I'm like this, right? Employees and people get the notion that, oh, well, Linda's not like bubbly. There's something wrong. And I've kind of cultivated this approach where I'm like, look, folks, I still love y'all. I'm still Linda. There's just certain aspects of my role that we have to talk about these difficult conversations, but it's entirely okay because I'm with you there 100%. Right. And so when we talk about compassion fatigue, oh my gosh, where do I begin? Right. I think HR experiences burnout for a reason, and we're often, in the realm of HR, especially kind of the people experience and the new, the new phase of HR right now. You talk a lot about emotional intelligence, right? Emotional intelligence, empathy, to a point where it's like, what happens when I'm all out of empathy? What happens when I can't empathize anymore? And what happens? And, it's really encouraging to me to see fellow HR leaders who are zoning in on that. HR for HR. Absolutely love it. But what I want to take away from this is I want to challenge HR leaders. If you have a department, do good by your team, but understanding that there needs to be a balance of compliance folks, back end HR folks, awesome. The quality of service still needs to be there, but then keep the empathy piece with your folks who are in employee facing, right? Those folks can be more more higher onto the spectrum of, emotional intelligence and empathizing with folks. And so for sure, just taking care of yourself in HR, but yeah.
And I think
you go first.
Sheila, and then Melissa. Sheila, please.
Okay, thank you. So I think the other thing is, and I think this is a big cause for compassion fatigue in HR people, is I've also seen this trend of companies when they're contracting now with new vendors. So let's say you're bringing on a concierge type service where they're going to be helping employees get through really horrible times in their life, whether that's a divorce or a death or a child that's ill or whatever that is. And you're going to be providing these services to your employees. Seeing a trend of the employers making sure that that vendor has this kind of awareness as well, and that they are making sure that their employees have the breaks, have the self-care opportunities, have the ability to say, you know what, I just talked to somebody who the most horrible thing happened to them, and I need an hour. I have got to take time because it was a lot. I mean, that empathy that you feel for people when you are working to help with them. It's just like in HR, right? It's now this is the next level down. And so that's just another trend that I've seen where employers are making sure that not only are they, working with women-owned and minority-owned businesses, but let's make sure that the companies that we're working with are as invested in well-being for their employees as we are. So just kind of keep everything going. One more thing for you to worry about in HR is, your vendors people.
Great. I think that's really valid, Sheila, very important. So I was going to add and think about the fact that it's, as Agustina was saying, about kind of modeling, have the HR team be modeling to others what it's like to show the compassion and realize that HR is handling so much and the role has evolved so much to do so many things. But I think it's really important that as part of the HR team, that you're also showing your people side. So a part of the meetings, right, you're all talking about what the strategy, what the goals are, how we're going to deliver to the business. But let's have some fun. Let's talk a little bit about you. I think the unity comes from knowing a little bit about people. You're more apt to help somebody, share with somebody if you feel like you know more about them. So I think that's important. And then that's something that HR business partners can kind of share with their managers and teams to kind of build that out and perpetuate that throughout. And I think it's really important that HR leaders and HR professionals show their authentic side, right? Like they can say, well, yeah, I had this happen and, I really needed to look at these resources that I've used before and make like utilizing what these programs that put into place like a normal thing, generalizable. So I think the more that we make that seem okay to say, yeah, I've been really stressed out. I wanted to just talk to somebody at the EAP just about how to manage my workload. Or, my mom's really sick and I use that too. Like it's really normal and totally acceptable. And mental health, even through the EAP, is not like, wow, you're somebody who has a really big problem, but look how much you're going to improve yourself and be able to empower yourself to do work and contribute better if you're able to talk through some of the things that are going on. So I think just make the HR team a place where everybody feels that they're part of a place where they can share, be open, help to model that in the other parts of the organization and show that that's important. Bringing yourself to work is important and being real about it.
Now, I don't know what your everyday realities are, but I will tell you something that happens in my world, and I will make a courageous guess that you will be able to resonate with it. So whenever imperative and strategy are used within the same sentence or very close to each other in a conversation, 9 times out of 10, the first question is, what's your data? What are the metrics? Show me the figures, make it concrete for me. Or who said this? So my invitation to you is, when we talk about employee health, what are some of the metrics that you recommend people pay attention to? And what are some of the stories/business cases that you recommend they build with them? And I will leave that question there. So please feel free to come into the conversation as you are comfortable and inspired by data.
Well, go Sheila, go for it.
Go Sheila, go Sheila.
I guess for me, having concentrated mostly in benefits, relying on that data that I'm getting back from vendors is huge. So I'm going to look at my medical plan and see where are, what are the stress points in my medical plan? Is it that I'm seeing an increase in the MSK? Am I seeing increases in gastroenterology? Are we, those kinds of issues that can be incredibly stress driven, or can be well-being issues. So looking for those things, I think, is really important. I always have to tout Lyra because I know they're doing a lot of work in what I mentioned the first question. Don't pat yourself on the back to solve a problem that you caused. They're doing work in coming into employers and actually working with the employees, and then with the C-suite to say, here's what we're seeing. Here's what your people are saying about what is it that's causing them the stress that's driving them to mental health solutions. And then bringing that to the C-suite, not as HR, but as, industry experts, to say, here's what it is. You're only, every manager has 25 people. That's too much. Every person is feeling like they have to work 50 hours a week to get the work done because there's not enough people on their team. All of those kinds of things that can contribute to the stressfulness of the position or how they feel. So I think it's really a matter of how do we bring all of that together, and what other data is there. Again, everything that you can get from your vendors is so important because you're able to see not just that you have an issue, but is there a specific population where that is a problem? Is it women under 30? Is it, men over 40? Is it people of color? All the great information that you can get from those analytics. I think it's super important to take all of that into account and to really press on your vendors to get you more data or help you to analyze that data to see where can we make changes either in our plan, in our organizational strategy, where do we need to make changes so that this is better for our workforce. And so to me, that's really the data and the purpose and the drive behind it.
Correct. Absolutely. I love the idea of getting that additional data, kind of getting granular with your vendors. Such a great suggestion. This is one I think we should get excited about when we, the metric, the business case is it's sometimes that's tricky, sometimes in HR. I guarantee someone other than HR is paying attention to benefits cost in your organization. So while that's, sometimes can feel like a pain point in a lot of ways, it's also going to be really beneficial for us in this moment because we have this significant cost that we can look to and we can build from, like Sheila said, with our vendor data. We also can take a look at some of our internal metrics, productivity, profit, different things. Take a look at that. Don't also miss out on employee voice, whether it's an employee engagement survey, whether it's stay interviews, exit interviews, a benefit survey. Hearing from your team can be really impactful, especially layered on with that additional data from vendors. Using the cost and the potential cost reduction or preventing even cost escalation when we think about benefits becomes such a powerful business case in almost every organization that it's a really great one to focus in on, because immediately you're starting to speak a language that many folks on your leadership team, they're keying in on anyway. So this is one where it's like, it's a big expense for organizations. Connecting in to overall well-being as strategy from that lens is going to be really impactful, especially when you can build out additional data.
I think that's exceptionally true. And I think it's important that a lot of these metrics are being looked at already through some of the HR dashboards And this is a great way to thread it back. So when we looked at the regular turnover statistics, right? Why are people leaving? What is the age of the people that are leaving? What's the reason that people are leaving? People have been looking at that for a long time. But now we're saying we're going to do the tie back and say we need to look about the value of the employee and what the well-being is showing us. So I think it's nice that we've had some of those frameworks there, but now we're able to use the data and explain it differently, have a different story to tell, and really make it and drive it home about what we need to be doing differently.
I want to add here, and by the way, I'm resonating with every thought here. We need to leverage also our people analytics teams. There are great resources and within those teams, and they can definitely help if we are a little bit not as heavy users on dashboards and data. We can definitely partner there and create solid, robust dashboards or hypotheses within those dashboards. They can definitely be partners and in crime here, understanding the data. And I also wanted to bring that benchmarking is already out there to help us build our business cases. And one that I really liked is by AON, and they identified that a company with already a well-being strategy in place can reduce turnover by more than 30% and absenteeism by less than 14%. So again, be using both our internal resources within people analytics, if we have a department or someone taking care of that, and also using resources externally from data that's out there.
Very well said. I want to add here, it's up to us to build the story or the business case, right? What I like to do is grab the qualitative data. Yes, the quantitative data is the HR dashboards, everything's great, but to build that story, and in a sense, be an advocate for the employees. So what I like to use is the organizational pulse. When you take a look at that, it's data taken directly from each employee and how they're feeling about their work. It dives into the confidence that they feel, whether it's about their work, the company, their leaders, their managers. And so the organizational pulse is very, very powerful. In addition to that, I also like to kind of, take note in surveys of, hey, what are the top benefits and offerings that people are interested in when they first come into the company? How does that evolve when they become an employee? And then when they leave, what can we gather from the exit interview, right? So a lot of qualitative data that once you kind of sit down with it, you'll notice the story that it tells and it paints, right? Some consistencies. And it also identifies the gaps that we as HR need to go in and just kind of, mend it a little bit. So, yeah.
Now, I was playing back our conversation in my mind, and so much inspiration, so much energy, so much care and compassion. But my next question would be, where should someone start? Like, okay, we close off this panel, and are there some key questions that could guide them into understanding how they can make things better or more meaningful? And Melissa, I am very mindful of the fact that you will have to drop off a little bit early. So if you could just kick us off, and then thank you so very much for being here. It was lovely having you with us. So where should we start?
Well, I think we have to start by making sure that we have everybody understanding what exactly our imperative is. And once we were talking all about the stakeholders and making sure that we had those people to buy in. But we need to make sure that we're making sure everybody is taking a really closer look. So I think it's important. But we want to start with, I think, as I'm bringing all my thoughts together that we've been talking about the whole time, I think we have to make sure that everybody's involved in it, right? We can't start with just one place. So a lot of times people start, as we've been talking about, with the C-suite, but sometimes with hearing the voice of the employee that we've been talking about, sometimes it's really good to focus there because sometimes when we're in a higher position, we sometimes lose touch with what's going on in all parts of the organization. So I think it's really important to start with making sure you understand everything that's going on in all parts and kind of putting those pieces together. Also, as we were talking before, looking at the symptomatology of things rather than just looking at things at face value. So I think it's digging a little deeper, getting involvement and partnership from everybody, and making this an inclusive proposition.
Thank you. And thank you for being here today. And whenever you need to drop off,
Thank
it
you,
was a
everybody.
pleasure having you. Thank you.
I would add, start with the information you have. I would warrant a guess you have something that we've talked about available to you, if not in hand already, whether it's employee engagement surveys, whether it's exit interviews, whether it's some of those data points from vendors, or even if you don't have them, can you send an email and get that information? Make a phone call, get that information. Look at the data you have as a place to start. So you are going to have the most impactful action items as you move forward. Because one thing I will say about the benefit space, about the well-being space, is it is incredibly busy. And so you can do a lot of adding on, you can do a lot of extras, you can keep yourself and your team very busy, and you might not see the impact you're hoping for. So I really would start from a place of understanding your current state before taking action.
Definitely agree both with Melissa and Stephanie about leveraging what's the data that's there and partnering with our C-suite in our strategic goals. And I want to add, or rather, I don't want to leave this conversation without stressing the importance of social well-being, especially as many organizations are today remote first or hybrid first. And what research is telling us, both outside, and I've been fortunate also to see some research within my last organization, is that more than 25% of employees feel lonely, and more than 52% feel not connected to the company culture, per research out there. So we need to tackle this, especially again in remote first organizations. How do we empower our leaders to make intentional spaces for their teams to connect and create this bond that was easily made when we were in person? Needless to say, I'm a huge proponent that culture can be cultivated remotely, but it requires this intentional aspect of putting effort and dedication and commitment in the agenda of our leaders to make it happen. So definitely a point that I want to make today.
Yeah, I think the other thing is just to remember, and sometimes it's very difficult, and I think especially when you're in the benefits side of HR, that you are not, or every employee is not you, and you are not every employee. And so embracing the differences that you've got, the diversity of your team, looking at, how everybody is living their life, what does their family look like? And I always think about pets. I don't have a pet. I just travel too much, but 70% of Americans have pets. And guess what? That's their family. At 30% of Americans have kids and 70% have pets. So let that sink in when you're talking about well-being. They're worried about those pets as well. So it's just the totality of everything. And so for me, it's always about talking to the employees and having those, whether it's focus groups or your pulses or whatever it is, and really trying to get to the meat of what will help them to maintain their own well-being, and also just to have an idea of what that means to them as well. So again, I have my idea about what well-being is. That's going to be different for, the 5,000 employees I might be overseeing or trying to get to wellness. So just really important to remember that as well, because sometimes it's kind of tough. Like, this is what I would love to have, but Agustina might be like, I don't need any of that. I need this. And Linda's like, oh no, but I need this. Stephanie wants something else. and so does Manola. So I think it's just really important to remember that, it is a diverse group, and we need to make sure that we're programming for that as well.
Beautifully said, Sheila. Yes. Side note, yes, our fur babies are our family. Where to start, right? I would say your own experience, taking, as Sheila mentioned, intentionality, right? I'm sitting there with yourself to say, how was my experience, right? And then, what would have been awesome about it? And then that's where you should start. If you are in charge of being architect of the people experience at your company, that's where I would challenge you to start. Just kind of creating that experience, ideally. Oh, excuse me. And then kind of integrating the little pieces that make sense for your company. And now then we kind of grab the qualitative data that we've all talked about, the quantitative data. By the end of it, I guarantee you that you'll have a business case to showcase to C-suite to say, hey, this is what the team values, and I can have the data to back it up. This is the experience that we should instill, because folks coming in are, inquiring about ABC, right? And so then it kind of ends off with a beautiful kind of big picture. So yeah.
Well, we are on time. And I was sitting here thinking, okay, what should be the wrap up round, and should we have a wrap up round? So I made an executive decision that we will have a wrap up round, and it's the one word challenge. So the last ask of you today is boil down the well-being imperative to one word. And we will go counterclockwise from how we started. So Stephanie, you will go first, but I will give you a few extra seconds just so that I can thank everybody in the audience for being here with us today. All the conversations are being recorded, so you can go back and check the recording on the same link on LinkedIn if you want to listen to it again or recommend it to friends and colleagues. And also, please consider the one-word challenge open for the audience as well. So the well-being imperative in one word. Stephanie, go.
I'm going to go with holistic.
Thank you. Linda.
I have to go with experience.
Thank you. Sheila.
I'm going to say listening.
Thank you. And Agostina.
So many words to choose from, but I think personalized, considering AI is here to stay and we can leverage that. Personalized, definitely my word.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, panelists and audience, for your time and energy and curiosity and support as always. Jessa, thank you. Always a pleasure having you with us backstage. And I hope I will get to welcome you again to many future conversations. Thank you.